Hey guys, it's me and Scooby. Scooby is gnawing on a bone back here. Not very vegan, but hey, I can't really blame him. He's a dog. Anyway, Pat, welcome to Wine Wednesday. I'm going to be sharing out, it's interesting. Hi Michelle, how are you? I'm very excited today as I'm talking about a topic near and dear to my heart. So I'm going to get started in just a minute. I just want to be able to share this video out. I decided to do it for my personal profile today, and I'll share it out to my page. If you don't follow me on Facebook, my business page is Sunny Gandera. And I also have one called Manufacturers, where I work with restaurants, food establishments to veganize their menus, and I also help them with wine lists. So if you haven't followed that page, it's called Manufacturers, not Manufacturers, but Manufacturers. And then of course finally my group, which is Plant Empowered Bon Vivants. That's enough plugging. I will get to the topic very quickly, and I hope that I will be able to do it uninterrupted, because I do have a sick dog and I've put her in a crate for now, so hopefully that should be okay for as long as I'm on here. Michelle, hi, if you're still there, say hello. Anybody else who's there, please tell me hi. Of course, if you're on replay as well, would love to just find out who's been watching and if you find this topic interesting. And if you don't know me, I am Sunny Gandera. I'm a vegan mentor for the plant curious. So essentially working with people who are considering going plant-based, but they're not quite sure if they can do it. They have a lot of issues, maybe perhaps don't know how to cook. They don't know what to eat to, have a wholesome diet, or they may have family members who are not wanting to get on that bandwagon, and I can help with all of that. And of course, my specialty also is wine, because I think that we should be able to have a glass of wine with our meal and it can still be healthy-ish. But I'm going to talk about that today, about whether or not I think wine is healthy. Is natural wine healthy? Hi Julie, thanks for watching. And great, actually live from you too today on cell phone usage and impact on our health and in general. I think it's a very interesting topic since we're always stuck on our phone and on the computer. So in any event, I wanted to go through what natural wine is. I don't know if you guys have noticed, I'm probably more immersed in that industry than you are, but I have seen a lot of articles talking about how natural wine is healthier or healthy for you, good for you. And also there's some people that don't agree, and there's some people that love natural wine, and there's people that are more fans of conventional wine. And I wanted to sort of go through all of these things with you today. And I have a fantastic wine from Sicily today, from Frank Cornelissen. He is kind of the guru of the natural wine world, although he doesn't like to use that that term himself. He likes, there's definitely different words for, hi Kristen, thanks for watching. There's definitely different terminologies for natural wine. Natural wine can sort of be anything these days. It's the sort of latest and the greatest in the wine world, and everybody who's cool is drinking it, it seems. But it can go by raw, it can go by naked wine, it can go by low intervention wine. So essentially, what is it? If you were to say, if I were to give it a definition, it's really like wine with nothing added to it. And that's the biggest question I get, is really, well, isn't wine just grapes and perhaps yeast? But in many and most cases, a lot of cases, certainly for conventional wines, there are actually up to 60 legal additives in the United States that you can add. They can range anywhere from sugar to acid, even some type of coloring. So there's definitely different concerns, because there's no real transparency in the wine industry, and I've talked about that before. There isn't anything that requires wineries to put any ingredients in the back of the label. The only thing they have to list is whether or not it contains sulfites, which all wines do, because sulfites is a natural byproduct of fermentation. Of course, winemakers can choose to add additional sulfites. Sulfites essentially preserves and stabilizes the wine so that it actually tastes somewhat similar to when it was bottled when you open it, and that could be like maybe years later. So that's why people, winemakers add sulfites. Sulfites isn't really necessarily, although a ton of sulfite isn't good because it's going to affect the flavor and kind of deaden the wine. Some is okay, I think personally, but in the natural wine world, very little sulfites is allowed to add. I think the maybe 35 to 70 parts per million is allowed in the natural wine world, whereas in the conventional wine world, in the United States, 350 parts per million is allowed. So that's up to 10 times as much. But in essence, natural wine contains no herbicides, pesticides, or none of those are sprayed on the wine. They are hand-picked, the grapes, instead of machine harvested, and that actually, what that allows is for them to actually go through each grape, pick the nicest one, and drop out some unripe grapes, say, or sort of bruised grapes, or grapes that are not great. So hand-picked is always better. You get better quality. You always use native yeast or indigenous yeast, and what I mean with that is actually yeast that are just kind of floating around in the air and settles on the grapes and the vines that are naturally occurring in the vineyard, versus some conventional wineries will choose to have commercial yeast. So that's actually man-made yeast, and they can impart different flavors onto the wine. And I also found out today, because I'm also constantly learning, I was interviewing Ashley Hertzberg, who's the winemaker at Amista Vineyards in California, and it's a winery that one of my clients, Vegan Wines, is featuring, and they have beautiful wines, especially sparkling wines. And that is that yeast also can turn the fermentation funky or have it go south. So there's a lot of effort going into selection of yeast, or not to use commercial yeast, but to go with native yeast. And that can also be tricky, because anything can happen, and that's what people don't understand. It's like they're really at the mercy of nature itself. And finally, with natural wines, there's no additives allowed. So I mentioned before things like sugar, acid, coloring, egg whites, of course, in fining, and oak chips even can be added. So conventional winemaking is definitely more sort of where wines are made in the cellar, versus natural wine, it just basically is made in the vineyard, and they do put very little hands-on in the cellar. So what does that have to do with health, right? Because I said natural wine seems to be the latest in vogue trend now. Natural wine actually has been around for thousands of years. There's just like right now we need to sort of label everything, right? Before, food was just food. We picked it out of the yard or of the ground or from the trees, and it was food, and we cooked it with very little added ingredients, and that was it. But now we have to label it. We have to say actually contains real whatever it is, right? And we label it organic or biodynamic, so that it's almost like a stamp of like it actually is real food, versus all this chemicals and preservatives added to it, which is kind of a sad state. And the same thing is with wineries. Actually, what we think of when we think of conventional wines, that is actually a new term. There are new techniques now all the time being developed, particularly in the cellar, of modifying wine to pretty much have it taste any way we want. A wine is a living thing, right, in the bottle. It isn't natural for it to taste exactly the same thing year after year, because vintages and weather patterns will change. And so technology has made this possible to actually add things and preserve the wine so that it does taste similar every single year. But and again, it's like really sad that we have to label things to make sure that it is the real thing. And it's also fascinating to see, of course, on the other spectrum of what can be done to food and wine, right? Like how creative people can be, but there's also sometimes a limit to what how much we should intervene, and I feel we need to sort of rein it in and bring it back to basics. And as I said, there's more than 60 additives allowed in winemaking in the US. Of course, that differs from Europe, but I think it's pretty much similar. Some things are not allowed in Europe, and vice versa. Somebody said that, of course, and I said not all natural wine is successful, as with any category. There's a lot of badly made natural wine. For those of you who have followed me for a while, you know that I am a fan of natural wine, but I'm also a fan of conventional wine. And when I say conventional, most of the winemakers that I follow and love, they are not, they don't put a lot of crap in their wine, but they do manipulate a little bit, because sometimes, there's another side to it where, it's good that we do intervene here and there. But there are, differing camps. So somebody said, you need to know a lot to do very little. And I think that's such a great sentence because much like it's tougher to cook a dish with few simple ingredients and have it taste actually wonderful, the same is true for wine. So, but you really need to know what you're doing. You can't just like let it go and like come back 3 weeks later, oh, now it's a wonderful wine, right? You do have to know what you're putting in and how you're storing it, how you're fermenting it, things like that. But back to this topic of, is natural wine healthy for you? So the wellness industry and everything wellness is so trendy right now, as is natural wine. So of course the wellness industry has now moved on to the wine industry and said, oh, it's which wines are great. So all products and categories are sort of riding on this wave, trying to capitalize it and label their wines healthy. So I see wine clubs that advertise low sugar, no sugar wines, low carb, keto, paleo. You know, there's all these labels being put on it now to sell more wine, because eventually that's what we want. And then pretty much the same thing is in the bottle as with every other wine you see out there. So, you know, natural wine can be easier for your body to digest because technically it is more pure. Of course, it doesn't have a lot of additives and tends to have also a lower alcohol content. However, that doesn't mean that you won't get a hangover, right? It doesn't mean that you won't feel sort of ugh the next day, because it is alcohol. Alcohol is still present, and no matter how you turn it, it isn't ideal for the body to drink alcohol, and definitely not in huge quantities. So again, here moderation comes in. Always eating when you have a glass of wine. That's how wine was made. It was made to be enjoyed with a meal. And I always say that it enhances the meal, and in many ways you slow down when you have a glass of wine and you want to sort of like see how it pairs with your food, and it can improve the pleasure. And not everything needs to be always 100% healthy, right, for you to eat it or drink it. It can be just because you enjoy it. Like I say, if you want to have a piece of cake, have a piece of cake, and don't worry about the sugar and this and that, because you're not eating it every single day. Of course, if you're eating something on a daily basis, be worried about what you're eating. However, when it's a nice occasion, or if you have it in small quantities, really the body can take it. So it's not really about always incorporating everything and making it healthy. You know, like cakes aren't healthy, cookies aren't healthy, wine isn't healthy, but it's enjoyable once in a while, right? So with natural wine, of course, you know, like I said, it can be easier for you to digest. And, you know, the hangover portion is more about it having less alcohol. So of course, the higher the alcohol, the more dehydrated you're going to be. And it's very important to drink water as well. But when it comes to, you know, I sort of think that people who are talking about the whole natural wine being purer and better for you, it's kind of like the wine version of gluten intolerance. All of a sudden everybody was gluten intolerant, and everybody was going to eat, you know, foods that have no gluten, and they had sort of, you know, mysteriously gotten intolerant to gluten when they didn't have that issue before. Not saying that's the truth for everyone, but it just was that trend, right? So this, we have to be careful with that in natural wine world too. It isn't this sort of heightened spiritual beverage, but it is. It has less additives. So if you're concerned about what you're ingesting in general, like for instance, if you are making your own ice cream, right, at home versus buying it in the store, there's a lot more additives and chemicals and things like you can't pronounce. So of course, the more preferable thing would be to make your own food, to make your own ice cream, your own cakes and cookies, so you can control what goes in it. With the natural wine, you know that very little, if anything, has been added to the grapes. So it's just grapes and perhaps a little bit of sulfites in there, and that's it. So then you kind of, you know, you have a little bit more control. For that reason, I really do think that natural wines are better. But not all wines made out there label themselves natural. Like I said before, there are some fantastic world-class producers. I could mention a slew of names, but I'd rather not. But if you have questions, always ask. That, you know, they market themselves as conventional high-end wines, but they do very little in the vineyard and winery because that is their philosophy. So you see what I mean? So labels and all this hype, I try to stay away from it because I like to get to know a winemaker and the winery that I that I drink and that I recommend. I know that not everyone has that luxury or access to people, but at the same time, that's why I'm here. And that's why you can tune into Wine Wednesdays every week, right? So today, I didn't want to go on and on about the health and wellness, but I think I wanted to just conclude that don't make everything into a health product. Alcohol is not good for you. Neither is it super harmful if you're just drinking it in small quantities and enjoying it with your meal. So don't make everything into such a big thing that you have to make everything healthy. But natural wines, if you were to choose between something that's mass produced and sprayed with Roundup and God knows what, of course choose natural wine, or a wine that is as naturally made as possible, whether they call themselves natural, low intervention, or whatever. So I hope that answers your question. Can't see if anyone's on right now, but if you have any questions, obviously just post them for me. So today I have a very special wine. It's very hard to come by, and I was actually really glad that my local wine store had it. It's from Frank Cornelissen. As I said, he's sort of the figurehead of the natural wine movement, although he doesn't like to call his wines natural. It's Susukaru. Scooby sees the neighbors. Of course, when I have it live, he always has to bark. Scooby, be quiet. Doesn't help, by the way. Susukaru is from Etna in Sicily, southern Italy. And he is, I guess this wine was really made famous by Action Bronson. If you guys know, he's a chef turned rapper, New York chef turned rapper, and he loves natural wine. He has I think he has a show where he's like, "Damn, that's delicious," or something like that. I'm not sure I have the title correct, but in any event, he was rapping about Susukaru, and this has become a very popular wine. But also in the natural wine world, he is a bit of a rock star. He's from Belgium originally, and he has produced wine since 2001. And he was the son of a Belgian wine broker, so he had access to wine, and started drinking wine and studying wine at a very early age. And he really loves grape varieties from Etna, especially Nerello Mascalese, which happens to be one of my all-time favorite grapes. So Nerello Mascalese you can find in Etna wines. They're native to the Sicilian region. It's a volcanic sort of soil there, so they have a lot of minerality, high acid, even though it's hot there, but also lots of juiciness. I like to think of Nerello Mascalese as sort of a bridge between Nebbiolo, which is very high and tannic from northern Italy, and Pinot Noir, which is more juicy and soft. And so this I actually chilled a little bit. I don't know if you can see it, but it's pretty light. So it doesn't look like a rosé, but it's definitely a lighter kind of purple, or even like a ruby core with pink tints around it. So this is actually made from a range of Sicilian native grape varieties. I'm going to put the name of the wine in the comments when I log off, but this is 85% Nerello Mascalese, and it has Nerello Cappuccio, which is the other grape that is used often in Etna reds. And then you have Minella Nera, Alicante Busquet, and Minella Bianco. So you have a little bit of white, a few red grapes, and there's sometimes Malvasia in there. There's sometimes Insolia, which is another native white grape from Sicily. But in any event, Susukaru is a Sicilian expression of they stole it because apparently they realized when they had their first harvest, the vintage, they realized that most of the grapes had vanished. I don't know if somebody stole it, but that's what this wine is named after. And I really love him because he is really a minimalist, and he has everything is like, they're clear glass, they're lighter, everything is more environmental friendly, including the special cork here that you can reuse. And then also he does nothing to the wine. His philosophy, and I wanted to read that off, it comes from their website, and I thought it was so beautiful because it really touches me a little bit, because I feel like that's how most people should think about nature and how to farm. He says, our farming philosophy is based on our acceptance of the fact that man will never be able to understand nature's full complexity and interactions. We therefore choose to concentrate on observing and learning the movements of Mother Earth in her various energetic and cosmic passages, and prefer to follow her indications as to what to do instead of deciding and imposing ourselves. So I thought that was so wonderful because, you know, he's so low interventionist that he thinks even biodynamic winemaking is interventionist, because then you follow certain rules, right? Like the moon is there and then we have to do that. But he thinks that we should pay attention to the wholeness of what goes on in nature, and then practice whatever is necessary according to that. So this is going to be fun to taste. I already did a little sneak taste. But it definitely has a little bit of that, say like volatile acidity, but it has that funk on the nose. It's not too funky on the nose. It has like red cherry, Scooby, red cherry, red fruits, red currants on the nose. Smells really fresh. This is 2017. And it says here, Nerello Mascalese dry red wine on the front. So he does label it somewhat. There's nothing on the back. Ooh. Really gripping tannins, but juicy, medium bodied, I would say, like, yeah, lots of that ripe red cherries, little earthiness as well, minerality for sure. And it's so fresh. When you think of that area, it can be so hot, but this is really right. And it's so smooth. It's really, really luscious. But boy, those tannins are there, but they're not in a bad way, but they're just gripping. So I can see something like, you know, perhaps some type of red pasta dish, like red sauce pasta with some type of maybe Miocos mozzarella cheese splattered in there for some fattiness. Falafels with maybe some type of tahini. Still on bye-bye sugar. Maybe when I'm done I can have a treat. Yes, Julie, if you can find it in Canada, I would absolutely recommend that you look out for Frank Cornelis. And his wines are, this one is actually his entry-level wine, so it's about $30, but his other wines can be very expensive. And that's another thing about natural wine. Some of them are so expensive now, and that's really not the purpose of them. They're supposed to just be very accessible, and but some of them are done, you know, very sort of hands-on, and they do require, you know, their manual labor in the vineyard, so that can be, you know, obviously a lot more work. So Scooby won't stop barking. I should have just put him in the crate, but in any event, caponata is another one. You know, that eggplant dip. It's got olive oil. It's kind of oily, but in a good way, but it's rich and a little fatty, and it has like nice raisins and capers, and you know, it's a very Sicilian dish, and I would totally have this with that. Any type of salads, but you know, because it has that high acid, but the salad I would have like a creamy dressing, not like a really high vinegar. You know, any barbecue, honestly, like I would do like a black bean burger maybe with a little smokiness, because there is some smokiness to the wine, because I do believe the volcanic soils, you can't taste the soil. I think that's people who think they can taste the soil, I think is a little, but you can taste sort of the type of soil it's in and the way that the grapes grow and how the wine is made, so you can kind of get an idea for the surroundings, right? So this is a really wonderful wine. Again, it's Susukaro 2017. Here's the label. You see it's all like clear, and there's nothing on the back here. One last thing I just wanted to say, and when it comes to vegan wines, because you do know that I naturally I recommend vegan wines that have not been fined with any animal byproducts. So meaning no egg whites, no casein, no skim milk, fish bladders, all the crazy stuff they put in. But in Europe and even in New Zealand and Australia, the government actually requires them to put the ingredients in the back, like may contain milk or may contain fish, may contain egg whites. It is required if they use that as a fining agent. In the United States, it's not. And I don't think in Canada either, Julie. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure not. So that means that if you had an allergen, you're very allergic to some of these things, there still could be traces of it in the bottle, which is why we're really pushing for more transparency in the wine industry, and we're working on that. My client Vegan Wines is also working hard on that, to have transparency so people can know what they're drinking, and I think that's really important. This you can actually rest assured Frank doesn't put anything in his wine whatsoever, other than the grapes, of course, that are needed in there. And does very little, if anything, in the vineyard. You know, sometimes you do have to spray with some type of organic, you know, mixture if the harvest is, or the weather is really bad that year, because you want to basically save the harvest, because you worked all year on it and they rely on that income. Europe is ahead of us. Yes, they are, to be honest, in so many ways, Julie. I'm hoping that we'll sort of follow suit soon, but we'll see what happens. In any event, I hope you found this interesting. I wanted to keep it short and sweet today, trying to keep my lives under 30 minutes and put more succinct information in there. Of course, if there's more people asking questions, I'll stay on, but in any event, Julie, thank you so much for coming on, and everybody else. Please look out for this Suzukaru. If you can find it, that's great. It's not easy to find his, so sorry, but I just wanted to put him forth as an example, because he really is a shining example of what natural wine is to me, and that is grapes and nothing else. That said, though, it's not health food, so just enjoy in moderation, and I will see you guys next Wednesday. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.